Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. Today is our Legends edition, and Vincent Turner is with us. Our producer and engineer is Jeremiah Long. And Vincent, we get to talk about a guy that was a part of why I love college football. And we're going to do so. We're going to honor the man, not perfect in any way, shape, or form, but certainly a difference maker to so many different people. And in the college ranks, he has to be put up there with some of the best because in the 16 years that he coached at the University of Southern California, he wins 4 national championships. And the year that he announces that he is going to leave the school and go to Tampa, they were the number 1 team in the country and they were undefeated at that time. He makes the announcement. They lose the next 4 games. And obviously that team would not be national championship capable. But nonetheless, we're going to talk about John McKay today. And Vincent, his place in college football, in my opinion, is etched permanently as one of the greats and a guy that certainly was a difference maker at USC.
Oh man, that's why I love doing this right now. It's a dream come true to be here on 100 Yards Football. What a great guy that's from the state of California. I'll be 65 this July of this year. And all my life, I've loved the game of college football, and I've been very blessed in my lifetime as a little boy during the 60s to see some great coaches up close and personal. One, Jerry Murphy at Tennessee State, followed Bear Bryant at Alabama, Doug Dickey at Tennessee. But when you talk about a coach that literally had this young man as a little boy growing up in the 901, I don't care, y'all get mad. It was must-see TV for me to get to a television and watch the University of Southern California play. And John McKay changed my life in loving the game. And I'm just going to put it out there today because back in the 60s, you didn't see a lot of African-American football players on rosters like at Kentucky, at Tennessee, at Alabama, or Ole Miss. But when you turn on that college football ABC with Bud Wilkerson and Chris Schenkel and watching the mighty USC Trojans in the 60s, in the 70s, John McKay changed my life. And all I can say today, I'm ready to go because I don't think he gets a lot of respect on the level of Bear Bryant. I don't think he get a lot of respect as such as a Vince Dooley. But he changed the face of college football because his ability to recognize the African-American athlete and the speed as he had. In the band, all I can think about back to you, Harper.
Well, John Harvey McKay was born on July 5th in 1923. He ended up expiring and died of cancer at June 10th of 2001. So during his 77 years, it was filled with some heartache and some tough times. He was born in Everettville, West Virginia, and his parents, John Sr. and Gertrude, had 5 kids. John was the middle of 5. He was brought up in a Roman Catholic house. His father was a superintendent in a coal mine, and he ended up dying when John was 13 years old. So trauma experienced itself very real and at an early age for John Jr. He went to Shinson High School, and he graduated in 1941. Think about that, 1941. And just a few months later, things would change in the United States pretty drastically. He had accepted a scholarship to play at Wake Forest. He had enrolled there and been on campus for just a day or so, was getting his classes arranged when news got back to him that he needed to come back home. His mother, Gertrude, had taken ill, and he left in order to take care of his mother. 1942, he was working as an electrical assistant at a coal mine. December 7th in 41 changed everything, but he got a couple of paychecks and then decided that he would enlist into the Army Air Corps. He was a tail gunner in a B-29. Think about that for just a second, folks. That's some pretty serious stuff. When you're looking, everybody that was going to be coming to try to get you would be doing it so from behind. But he saw action in the Pacific Theater. So he recognized what a Mitsubishi engine sounded like, certainly. When the war was over, he ended up going to Purdue. He was a 23-year-old freshman, if you will. Played at Purdue for a year or two, and then he transferred to the University of Oregon out in the West Coast. And he got to play running back during that time. That was his position. And he played with Norm Van Brocklin at Oregon. So his encounter with great players and guys that would go on to be NFL legends obviously stem from those very early years. They were the Pacific Coast champion back in 1948. They had a tie with Cal. Both teams were 7-0, and because they didn't play each other, there was no tiebreaker. So they had a coin flip, and Cal ended up going to the Rose Bowl, and the at that point undefeated Oregon team ended up going to the Cotton Bowl, and they lost to SMU 21-13 in that game played in Dallas. But they were 9-1 overall that season. His following year, his senior year at Oregon, they went 4-6, and it was after that he decided that he would end up sticking around and see what coaching would be like. He didn't get an opportunity to play in the pros. He certainly didn't want to be an electrical assistant anymore, but he wanted to give coaching a try. So he stayed at the University of Oregon, and within a couple of years, they had some difficulties. In the early 50s, there were two different coaches that were there that he worked under. Jim Atkin was one, and then Len Casanova. He was with Len for 8 years. They had a couple of pretty good teams there. Len had come from Pitt. In 1958, they end up going to the Rose Bowl. And Oregon ends up losing that game, but they moved down to the Southern California area, and that is where his career with the University of Southern California begins. And Vincent, I threw a lot of early stuff in there. I probably missed a few things, but it took him a little while at Oregon as an assistant before he got his chops together. He impresses the athletic director and obviously the president of the University of Southern California, and he gets the job at USC in 1960.
What people don't really understand is that when he took the job at USC, he came into a lot of pressure. I think the Trojans in the 50s had that scandal with John Arnett as the running back. They hadn't won in 6 years. And then John McKay's first 2 years was losing seasons. And if I recollect, I think they was talking about firing him.
Yes, they were.
Well, okay, I knew it had to be some truth to that story. But the one thing I admire about people is that when you're under adversity, you believe in your plan and you stick to the guns. No matter what people think, and we could tell the story here 100 yards of football easily. No matter what everybody telling you can't do, you're not going to be successful, you're crazy, your dream is not going to come fruition. In the main words they tell you, you're wasting your time. But see, John McKay had a plan. And his first 2 years, he said that I'm going to recruit the best athlete. I need some speed. And it takes time to build a football team. And I'm going to get the best athlete to come to SC, and it's going to change my fortunes. And that best athlete in the football realms is your quarterback. Your best athlete on the baseball field is your pitcher. And it changed. 62, he got a little lucky, though. He got to give kudos to Willie Brown, and he played that 3-quarterback system with Bill Nelson and Pete Belfort. And they ended up winning the Rose Bowl, his first national championship in 62. But after that, recruiting that best athlete, he was able to get Bob Chandler, Hal Bledsoe, Len Swan, Anthony Davis. See, all those guys were quarterbacks. And the fortune was changed. And just to show you how powerful USC was in the 60s, that 67 team, the one when he had the young man from Galileo High School, San Francisco Junior College, by the name of the Juice, he had Mike Holmgren, who you know, Harper, and Jim Fawcett, a good coach, a great coach with the New York Giants. They were on the bench. But this man had a plan. And I'm going to say it for the 100th time. What I loved about him, he recruited the African-American athlete. And it was the thing that changed SC football. And when I was 7, 8 years old, college football come on Saturday, I ran home. And I get back to what really changed my life was that 67. I go back every time and see O.J. Simpson take that 32 dive, get in the hole, make that jump step, take it to the house. And I see all them Californians with their sunglasses. I say, man, they having a time. And they doing that. Oh, today we're going to be right, baby. Back to you, Hop.
Well, you mentioned some of the coaching people that he was with in situations. Norman Topping was the president of USC in 1960. He's the one that hired him. They went 4-6 that first year. They went 4-5-1 the second year. And the pressure from the alumni and from everybody else, even on the campus, was, we got to get rid of this guy. He's not the right one for us. It's not acceptable to only win 4 games a year at the University of Southern California. Norman Topping made a conscious decision to wait 1 additional year because he thought it would be unfair to fire a coach without allowing his players to get on the field. Freshmen weren't allowed to play back then, so he would recruit a freshman group of kids, but they had to sit. So that first year, they did in 4-6. The second year, he was still playing with players that he had not recruited. So thank you, Norman, for giving this man 1 extra season to kind of prove his point. Well, they went undefeated. And it was all downhill from there from a athletic perspective. People wanted to go there. They liked the Song Girls. They certainly liked Traveler, and they loved the schedule. And John was not shy about scheduling tough opponents during those non-conference games every year. And he developed a relationship with other coaches, some that were a part of USC. For example, there was a young Al Davis back in the late 50s when he was an assistant coach at USC. Al Davis was, before he was the Raiders managing general partner and a part of the AFL, he was an assistant at the University of Southern California. There's a guy named Dave Levy. Dave Levy, excuse me. We all know Marv Levy with the Buffalo Bills, but Dave Levy was an assistant, really kind of a right-hand man for John, and was with him for years. Marv Goo was another guy that was around him forever. Marv was the defensive line coach, real tough guy, and he was the one that would have to yell at guys to get him to move every day. John really wasn't that guy. You see him with his arms crossed in the pictures there mostly. He was semi-distant from the players. He was the guy that would close the deal. The assistant coaches would bring the kids in, and if you needed to visit with Coach McKay, well, that was basically, you're going to sign on the dotted line or you're going to move on with your life. I spoke with Clay Matthews yesterday, and it was kind of like that for Clay. Clay walks in, and he sits down, hello, Coach McKay, and the assistants were around him, and they were kind of a little nervous, around him, everybody walking on eggshells. Clay, it's time for you to go visit with Coach McKay. Well, how was your visit here, kid? Had a great time, Coach. All right, well, terrific. Any questions that you have for the old coach? No, sir. No, I don't have any questions at all. Okay, well, good. Well, we'll get everything taken care of. That was it. He was only there for a couple of minutes. Now, other folks might visit with him a little bit longer, but again, his presence and his ability to put his hand out and shake your hand with one of those national championship rings, especially during the early and mid 70s, that was a tremendous asset that man had. But that 62 national championship team obviously changed everything for him, and it began the process of him being able to bring in guys like OJ and Anthony Davis and a Sam Bam Cunningham. Talk a little bit about the difference that he made there at USC.
Well, if you remember, I'm going to go back a little time. After they won that 62 national championship, I think it was a key moment in his life, Coach McKay. Remember, the rivalry between SC and Notre Dame was heavy, and Notre Dame was in the state of California recruiting players at a high level. But the one game, and getting to your point, his ability to get the Sam Bam Cunninghams, is that what I read, they lost to Notre Dame in 66, 51-0. And all the USC alumni was embarrassed. And he came out and he told the team, he said, okay, y'all go take showers. But 1 billion Chinese don't give a damn about us losing to Notre Dame 51-0. It's what we're going to do going step forward. And then that 67 team, as you just mentioned, Hart, brought the juice in, Ron Yeri, Mike Race, Steve Sauge. And then the 70 team with Sam the Bam Cunningham, going down to Birmingham, Alabama, Jimmy Jones at the quarterback. And SC, they say changed the culture in the South, but they had already changed the culture in the South in college football before then. But then I remember Sam the Bam Cunningham as a 12-year-old on that 72 team. I know there's been some great college football teams in our great illustrious life. But that 72 team, that's probably one of the most special football teams I followed as a college football fan living in Memphis, Tennessee. Sam the Bam Cunningham was the MVP in the Rose Bowl that year. Would he have, like, I believe 4 touchdowns where he just kept going over the top, athletic, 5 slammer jammer. But that team was special, man. 13 All-Americans, 33 that played in the National Football League. And that 72 year, they played 6 ranked teams. And I remember the first game, I tell this story all the time. WHBQ in Memphis, Tennessee. That was the University of Arkansas Razorback Sports Network. And I remember the Trojans came to Little Rock. And the hype and the excitement around that game was special. And see, they played at Little Rock Memorial Stadium in Little Rock. And the stadium is inside the fairgrounds next to a zoo. So you can see 53 crazy Razorback fans calling the Hogs. And Richard Batman Wood said he was scared, but he had that blood going through him. And Sam the Bam Cunningham said, welcome, man. This is what you came to SC for, coming all the way from New Jersey. And that year is always going to stick in my mind because they beat Arkansas the year they had Joe Ferguson. They beat Stanford that year, they had Scott Laylaw. They beat Washington that year, they had Sonny Six Killer. They beat UCLA, they had Pretty Boy, the actor Mark Harmon. And they beat Notre Dame and Tom Clemens. And then they ended up beating Ohio State and Archie Griffin. And they beat all 6 of those teams by an average of 20 points. And Sam Cunningham was a big part of that team, along with Anthony Davis, Manfred Moore, Lynch Swan, Charles Anthony, Marvin Carr, and Richard Batman Wood. Can you say the greatest team ever? And that's why I remember Sam the Bam Cunningham. Kudos to you. Bless you while you're in heaven. If you didn't like college football and you didn't like USC and you didn't like what's going on out in LA, it was electric. It was special. The band was outstanding. Dun, 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 dun. Back to you, Hart.
Yeah, in 72, 73, and 74, they end up losing a total of 3 games. They tied 2. And national championship, undefeated, 12-0, and really set themselves apart. That was his 3rd national championship in the, what at that time was probably the 11 years that he was there, 12 years, excuse me. And just amazing. Rose Bowl had become a little more popular back in those days. It was an important destination, but as we've mentioned on other shows, the Rose Bowl champion and the Cotton Bowl, you throw the Sugar Bowl and the Orange Bowl, which was rising, these teams didn't play each other. So there was a reason to be around your TV set on January 1st to see who the national champion was going to be. And a lot of times, well, my team won, but they didn't win by enough. The average differential with the amount of points that they would score in the victory that SC had in that year, as you mentioned, 22 points. The lowest ranked team of the 5 that they played that year was 18th. So they played some really good teams that year, and they were just head and shoulders above everybody else. So congratulations on that. And then part of what you mentioned earlier with Alabama and the racial divide that there was in college football at that point, Bear Bryant and John McKay were very good friends. They were almost family. They would vacation together. And John's wife, Corky, would treat Paul as one of the family. Paul, we're gonna have a bite to eat here. Come on over. I'm glad. Thank you. They'd go to Las Vegas, and John and Paul would gamble. There's a story of the two of them, and they're at one of the hotels. I don't know what Caesars or the Sands or the Dude. It doesn't matter. And the pit bosses would realize, hey, we got John McKay and Paul Bear Bryant here. Don't let them leave. Make sure they get a whiskey sour or whatever it is that they're going to have, and keep. And they play till 3 or 4 in the morning. But the word around the strip, and on the street was, hey, you got to come to the Sands. Check out what's going on. And the place would be packed. And the two of them would tell stories, and they'd smoke cigars, and they'd play poker, and they'd end up with a couple of bucks. You want to make sure that they win. And Paul Bear Bryant had a brown grocery bag full of cash. He probably had $5,000-$10,000 in it, and he gave it to J.K. McKay and Rich McKay, who were the kids, John's sons, that were staying in a different room. They didn't have safes in the rooms back in those days, and Paul didn't want someone breaking in his room and stealing his money. So he left the money with the kids, knowing full well that no one's going to steal anything that the kids have, and not knowing that they had the money. When the vacation was over and it was time for them to go back, Paul would say, son, do you have that grocery bag of mine? Oh yeah, Uncle Barry, I sure do. And Rich or JK would give it back to him. He'd open it up and pull out $100 bill and give it to Corky and say, here, let the boys split this. So Paul, we can't take your money. We're not going to know. They did right. So little things that you hear about relationships with people and things that are going on that, kind of make the game a lot more fun to know a little bit about. But they were very good friends, very competitive on the field. SC would go to Alabama. They'd play in Tuscaloosa. They'd win. And then Alabama would come out to Southern California, and they would win. So the road team always would be the winner and have an advantage there. Things changed in 75. The Trojans were undefeated. And then mid-season, John announces that he's going to be leaving USC, and he's going to become the head coach at the expansion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The team was undefeated at that point. They end up losing 4 in a row, and they go to the Liberty Bowl. They end up winning that Liberty Bowl, but it was a sour note and a immediate change, not only in the locker room, but the way that USC played on the field. Talk a little bit more about just his legacy at SC, 4 national championships in 16 years, 127 wins, 40 losses, 8 ties during his 16 years there.
Changed college football, man, from a perspective that he gave a lot of people a lot of opportunities. And I don't want to keep saying the African American, but at the quarterback position, they have Jimmy Jones as a starting quarterback in 1969 and 1970. Throughout the college football landscape, I don't think it was a lot of quarterbacks of African Americans playing that position. But most of all, and I could tell you this, you take any kid that was watching college football, such as myself, from the 70s to 75, I tell you, if there was any type of recruit in anywhere in the part of the country, they wanted to be out in LA. And the man right here that we're looking on the screen, he changed that. And I got a lot more respect for him after he left SC, took over an expansion team with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Was horrible. Lost every game his first year. But again, he took another gamble. He took a young man out of Grambling State University, #1 overall, Doug Williams. And they got the Buccaneers to the playoffs in 1979 after he was there 3 years. And all the scrutiny and pressure that came with that. Mr. McKay don't get a lot of respect a lot of times, in my opinion. When we talk about great college football coaches, it's always Nuke Rockne, it's always Bear Bryant, it's always Nick Saban. No disrespect to any of those gentlemen. But if you really a student, if you really a guy that loves college football, this gentleman right here, it's got to be going on that list of the top 3 that changed the game forever. Because he brought the speed to the game. He brought the African-American player playing on a high level. And he brought, most of all, excitement. Watching USC through the 70s, it was like watching pro football on steroids. Look at all the great players that came through there. It's never going to be a list of players. Simpson, Cunningham, Munoz. Come on, even though they played under John Robinson was one of his assistants. Man, it was special. And I love USC football. And I was a kid in the South, thousands of miles away. But I kept up with that Trojan program. Harper LaBelle, you being from that area, you should be proud every day, man. Mr. Stephen Travers, you should be proud every day. When people mention college football, they need to put the USC Trojans up top. Hollywood, City of Angels. Back to you, Harper.
Well, he certainly made a difference there. And another thing that he should be credited for that was a game changer was the I formation. Student body right, student body left. You mentioned a couple of the linemen. Obviously, Mike Garrett wins the Heisman Trophy. O.J. Simpson wins the Heisman Trophy. You had Anthony Davis that, in my opinion, should have won the Heisman Trophy. They voted before he played against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in the game that he had another 3 touchdowns. So running back, yes, absolutely. But, not without having great offensive linemen. So many guys went to the pros because of their experience there at USC. Defensive players, the speed that you mentioned, the black athlete that you mentioned, so many different things that John McKay was accountable for while he was at the University of Southern California. Now, one of the things, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, a high school story, you look at number 10, that's Pat Hayden. He was a quarterback at USC. Number 25 is his son, J.K. McKay. Rich is a little bit younger. And the color picture below John there in that upper left-hand corner, that's another picture of J.K. Pat Hayden lived in their home during his senior year. He went to Bishop Almont High School, and can you imagine being Corky McKay, the wife? What were conversations like at the table? Hey, I'd like to talk about there's a sale going down there at the shoe store. Nope, we're going to talk more football and even more football. That's what we're going to do. So God bless Corky McKay for her ability to be patient with John and those high school kids. They obviously ended up both going to USC. Pat was a starting quarterback. He ended up being an athletic director. He was a Rhodes Scholar, get to play in the NFL, obviously, in the World Football League. But those were some of the fun little stories. And part of his life was being accountable for other young men and helping them to rise up to be fantastic men and to grow in their community. When he goes to Tampa, everyone will say, well, it was the money that made him do it. Well, I think there was a challenge startup team that he would get to build from scratch, unlike Cleveland, unlike New England, unlike the LA Rams, who had made offers to him that he had turned down. He ends up going to Tampa. Now, the pay increase was dramatic. He was making about $200,000, maybe $300,000 a year with bonuses at SC, and he ends up with $2 million when he gets to be a part of Tampa Bay. But he gets to mold and craft and put everything together. He brings a lot of SC Trojans with him, doesn't he, Vincent? When he first starts, Richard Wood, you mentioned a few of the others. Mike Ray was a part of that. Ricky Bell was a part of that decision, high draft picks. It didn't necessarily work out. 0-14 that first year. They were 0-12 in the second year. So they had lost 26 straight games, a record that no one wants to be a part of, but that's John McKay in the era. They end up beating the Saints and then the St. Louis Cardinals to end that second year. They win 5 games there next year, but then they play for the conference championship. They end up with Doug Williams at the helm. They end up getting to play in the NFC championship and hosting it against the LA Rams.
When you talk about a man that done it at a high level, at the college level, and then had a plan and went into the pro ranks, we always say this here at 100 Yards Football, those facts, you can't change it. It's in black and white. The man is one of the greatest football coaches that's ever stepped on this face of the earth. Also, let me throw in there, Steve Spurrier was also on that expansion first year with the Buccaneers, the good old ball coach. But it's no more. I don't have to say anymore. The facts are John McKay, I'm going to keep mentioning it every time, it's one of the top 3 coaches in football, period, whether it's college or pro. And he done it with a plan, as you mentioned, the I formation. But he knew he had to have a quarterback under center that can make it happen. And he had to have guys that can really rush that football, that had speed at the tailback position and on the outside. Just make a whole long story short, what you're seeing right now in the National Football League with all these great athletes that we're going to see playing the Super Bowl on Sunday, Philadelphia and Kansas City, it started with SC playing in the 60s. That's where it started. And I challenge anybody to correct me if I'm not. There's two parts in my life that I say football really came to part and where all the great football has been played in my lifetime. My younger years in the 60s, and I'm never going to back down from this. Watching the mighty USC Trojans and all the athletes they had in the HBCUs, the SWAC conference down south. You can do the facts, you can do the research. Look at all the great players that came out of those both eras, SC and the SWAC, and you have Hall of Fame. O.J. Simpson, first back to go over 2,000 yards. Where you go, SC. Walter Payton, I don't have to say no more about him. Jackson State. The greatest wide receiver ever played the game, pound for pound, Jerry Rice, Mississippi Valley. USC, maybe one of the greatest during that time, fullbacks that ever played the game, Sam the Bam Cunningham. Where did he go? SC, one of the greatest receivers who really put the game of calling athletic ability, Len Swan, SC. I dropped the mic today here on 100 yards of football. It's no better football being played in those two eras. In the 60s started it off with this man right here, Mr. John McKay, out in California, and it started back down south with the SWAC. Back to you, Harper LaBelle.
Well, his coaching career speaks volumes. Obviously, at USC, he did some great things, the 4 national championships. He tries a new venture. He goes to Tampa, has drastic results. There are even those in the family that kind of quietly said they knew within the first week that this was a completely different situation. This is not going to be good. And it wasn't. There were some tough things. And you see some of the great quotes of coaching history. John McKay was behind a few of them. And in that adversity, when someone says to him, Coach, how do you feel about the execution of your team? And he says, I'm in favor of it. It's just one of those lines that just will speak volumes. But it was during those tough times that kind of forged some things. Tampa did turn it around a little bit. They end up winning some Super Bowls, obviously, well after John was done. But he wanted to try something new, try something different. And he was a part of that creamsicle era, if you will, there in Tampa when they had the red and the orange jerseys. It is what it is. But John McKay, who was replaced by John Robinson, in that era for me, that was when I fell in love with football itself, and college football especially. The fight song, Traveler, the Song Girls, everything about USC, including the play by the players, changed my life, certainly in many different ways. So we want to honor him today. John Robinson passed away on June 10th in 2001. And prior to that, he ended up winning 127 games. He had 40 losses in the college career. He had 4 national championships, 1962, 1967, 1972, 1974. They won the Pac-8 9 times during that time. He was the AFCA Coach of the Year twice. He won the Eddie Robinson Coach of the Year award twice. Sporting News College Football Coach of the Year back in 1972. He's in the College Football Hall of Fame, and he has won John Harvey McKay. Final words, Vincent.
Hey, great coach at a great university, changed the face of college football, went on to the National Football League, had success. John McKay is always going to go down as one of my special people, my special persons I follow as a head coach at this game. And the players that he had out of USC, it was just electric at the time. Special. And if you're a USC alum or you close to the program, I understand why you got an ego. I understand why you're arrogant. Because back then, the Trojans were on top of the world. My final words about John McKay. Peace to Mr. John McKay. Back to you, Mr. Harper LaBelle.
if you want to have some fun, look up USC Marching Band Fanfare. It's when they take the field, and it is part of that electric. And it certainly had greater significance when you know that the team behind it was pretty dang good. And John McKay was a part of that as well. So we want to honor him and say thank you, John, for your contribution to football, college and pro. The pro didn't go so well, but that's okay. Had a great life, a wonderful career, and certainly a difference maker in so many different ways. Your two daughters, you have Michelle and Terry, your two sons, to your wife, Corky, we want to say thank you for all that you did and your contribution to the game of football. So for 100 Yards of Football, in this Legends edition, I'm Harper LaBelle along with Vincent Turner. Our producer and engineer today is Jeremiah Long. We want to thank you for being a part of the show here today. And we hope everybody has a fantastic day. We appreciate it. Have a wonderful one.